podcast where I review the movies I have just seen as I am driving home from the theater. And I was looking forward to this one, and I'm looking forward to it for a very specific reason. That this is the first live-action remake of an animated film that I have absolutely no prior connection to. With all of the Disney ones, I have some kind of experience with just about all of them. I can't think of a Disney animated movie that they've done a live action version of that I haven't seen, didn't have some kind of emotional connection to, or at least had some kind of opinion on prior to seeing it. But the How to Train Your Dragon series is one that just, it never really caught my eye. I knew of its existence, and I know that it's spawned, I think at least 3 sequels. I think they've done 4 or 5 of them. I don't really know. I think I might have seen one of them on TV once. The fact that I cannot remember if I have or not should tell you, how much attention I paid. And that's not a knock on it. It's just to say that, it was past the point where I was seeing a lot of movies, and it was prior to when I started doing this, when I went and saw almost everything, so that series kind of got lost. So it's kind of exciting to be able to see one of these without any kind of prior knowledge or predetermination of opinion, or always saying, well, the other one did this and the other one did that. I actually get to judge this movie as its own thing, which is, in this day and age with sequels and remakes and reboots and reimaginings, that is kind of a rare thing. So yeah. So for anybody who is familiar with the series, so a lot of this is just going to sound very elementary to you because you already know of all of it. I, on the other hand, again, coming at it from a completely novice standpoint. So let's take a look at this. So we have this Viking village located in some mystical dragon-infested island where the people are constantly under siege by different varieties of dragons. One of the things I'm going to say right off the bat, and I knew this, again, with a little bit of prior knowledge I had of the film series before this, I knew that the dragons were a little bit more cartoony than you might see in other things, like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, or anything that has, dragons as a very central part of the narrative. But one of the things I did enjoy about this one is I liked that all of the dragons, there are different varieties of dragons, and they're differentiated not just by their coloring, but by actual shape and design. And I knew that was something that the original films had done. But this one, I think, found a really nice balance between keeping the original designs and keeping the original cartooniness of them. These are things that you want to sell plush toys of, obviously, but also making them look realistic. That's a really, really tight rope to walk, and they did a great job. I like that all the dragons have different body types, they have different coloring, and you can see in the detail their resemblance to real life creatures. Like one of the small ones has like a little kind of iguana eye. You know, the two-headed one is a little bit more snake-like. You know, our main dragon, Toothless. Toothless looks really good. That was I really enjoyed the animation and the characterization of Toothless. Finding characterization for CGI characters and ones that don't have celebrity voices or something like that is tricky. But I like that through body language and nonverbal elements like that we actually do get to see a specific personality develop. I know that was one of the clips I've seen of the original. I know that's something they did really well in the original series of films. You see any kind of footage of him, and it's very kind of a perfect blend of cat and dog. And yeah, I thought the animation and the dragons themselves looked really, really good, and I liked the differentiation. So kudos to them on that. Anyway, so our main character is the young son of the chief named Hiccup. Where did they come up with these names? I'm very curious if there's like some kind of history or reason why these kids have names like Hiccup or Snot Rag was one of them, or something like that. It was Snot something, and I think the bigger kid was Fish Legs. They never explain where these names come from, and I'm very curious. It's like, why would you name your kid that? You know, just, is there a reason? I don't know. But Hiccup is our classic, you know, adorkable kind of protagonist. That protagonist that has become very, very commonplace in animated films like this. That you know, he's lovable, but he's clumsy. You know, he wants to fit in, but he's different. You know, he's not like the other. You know, it's very pat. It's a thing. I've heard this criticism of Disney films, and I do kind of agree with it, that the Disney princess has evolved from the earlier archetypes of just, I'm pretty, you know, and then they went into Pretty and Sassy, which was more in the 90s, and then in the, you know, 2000s and into today, they're adorkable. You know, they're pretty, but they're clumsy. You know, all these things. So Hiccup is already given a pretty pat archetype that he has to play. And I want to give a lot of credit to the writers and the actor Mason Thomas for, again, Hiccup is very, very typical of this type, but at the same time, I didn't feel like he was just copy-pasted. I did feel like there was an interesting dynamic going on with him. What I enjoyed is how, and at first this kind of pissed me off, I was mad at this, or like for the first 10 seconds it happened, and I was like, is that he wants to be a dragon slayer, he wants to be one of the cool kids, and then his dad finally says, okay, I'm going to put you in there to learn how to be a dragon slayer. He's like, oh no, I don't want to do that anymore. And his dad's like, no, you're going to do it. The only reason that frustrates me is that we, the audience, know that in the interim between these two conversations that Hiccup has befriended Toothless, or at least has formed some kind of early stages of a connection with him, and has kind of seen that dragons aren't necessarily dangerous and evil as they've been portrayed. So we get this, but from his dad's point of view, if you look at it from that, it's like your kid wants this. You finally say, okay, I'm gonna, and then they're like, oh no, I don't want that anymore. That's got to be frustrating as hell. The older I get, the more I come to sympathize with characters like that. And I don't even have kids, but yeah, it's that's a minor thing. Anyway, the fact of the matter is, I enjoyed the character. Again, nothing really out of left field, nothing really huge that he did, but yeah, I liked it. I liked Hiccup. I have to say that one of the, I don't know if it's an issue, but one of the things I did notice about the film, and I don't know if it's because, you know, these characters have become so commonplace, or if it's just in the way they were portrayed, but I did find a lot of the other characters, you know, very kind of one note. You know, I did feel like they were, you know, you had the cocky Flash Thompson kid who wants to be the best, but his dad doesn't pay attention to him. You know, that's snot rag or whatever. Of course, you had Astra, the female badass, you know, who is just good at everything, but of course she had to work her way up from nothing. You know, you've got the funny, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be mean here, but you got the funny fat one who knows facts, but, you know, isn't great on his feet, or, you know, you have the two twins who are, you know, kind of bullies, but not, yeah, I mean, these are all very pat characters, very stock, and maybe as the films went on, the animated ones, maybe these people get a little bit more flushed out, and they get a little bit of more things to do. I don't know. I'm just judging this on the film I've seen, and none of them were bad. I want to stress that. Nico Parker, who played Astrid, the last thing I remember seeing her in was that god-awful Dumbo remake. Is this her thing? Is she, like, just playing characters in animated movie remakes? Is that, like, her bread and butter? I mean, fine if it is, you know, whatever. And I do feel that she's better here than she was there. Of course, that was several years ago. She's gained experience. I remember thinking that in that movie, she felt like a Vulcan. You know, very little emotion, very little facial expression. You know, it was very robotic delivery. She was better here. I still feel like she forces it a little bit. And I think as she gains experience and as she goes on, I think her delivery and her connection will start to become more and more natural. Again, you can see the progression from Dumbo to this, so she has grown as a performer, and I think she'll continue to grow. But I still think she's a little wooden. Not bad. She's not like Chris Pine bad, but her delivery and her interaction with other characters doesn't feel as natural as I kind of like it. You know, she doesn't ease as easily into her characters as some of the others. You know, Hiccup, Mason Thomas, yeah, does kind of have a very easy and natural way about him, and he's able to do that with with that early 2000s Justin Bieber ridiculous haircut. So good on him. You know who I was happy to see in this? I was happy to see Julian Dennison as, I think, Fish Legs. You know, he's the big kid with the nerd knowledge of everything. Who, you know, recites stats like a D&D nerd, which I kind of like that. I like that there's a D&D nerd in a world with actual dragons. I think that's kind of funny. But it was nice to see him. I've enjoyed a lot of the films I've seen him in, and I like that I keep seeing him pop up in things. The last thing I saw him in was Y2K, and he was enjoyable in that. So it was nice to see him in there. And again, he did an okay job. I think the characters just were a little binding, personally. But then again, to be fair, let's be fair about this. This is a movie made for kids. And the original was made for kids. And I have found that in properties made for kids, sometimes characters have much broader personalities so that it's easier for the audience to kind of find the one they relate to. You know, I'm sitting here bad-mouthing this, and all these characters are very, very one note. Well, what's one of my favorite properties? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And the leader, the burnout, the tough guy, and the nerd, I mean, these are very stock character traits, and it's one of the things that allowed young people to kind of immediately glom onto one. Or look at the Power Rangers. How, what were the very personalities there? Good luck. Good luck basically, determining their different personalities, because it's very hard. I mean, if you're a longtime fan, you can, and I'm sure longtime fans of this can. So what I'm saying is that for the audience it was intended for, the choice makes sense. I would have liked to have seen something richer, but again, I'm not the target audience. So there you go. I also have to say, it didn't bother me here, because I think they blended it well enough, was the mixture of contemporary dialogue and delivery with a more stylized, I don't want to say style, but the adults all had this very big and bombastic, very Shakespearean, Gerard Butler is the father, so they all had this very, and the younger kids had some blend of that or more recognizable speech patterns. And sometimes that drives me crazy. But I think here, again, the different characters, depending on who they were, I think it had a neat blend. So it is one thing that differentiated the characters. So yeah, that worked out really well. All in all, I found the film really, one of the parts that I did have a problem with, and I'm wondering how many kids in the audience had a problem with this. I think when you have an animated feature and you have a cartoon character doing something to another cartoon character, there's a little bit of a disconnect sometimes. In this one, because it was real and the animation on the dragons was very well done, when they were doing mean things to Toothless, or when the people were, I was genuinely disturbed by it. I didn't like it. It was like seeing someone being mean to a dog in a movie. I wonder, I remember very, very vividly. This is a very weird parallel to draw. I'm going off on another one of my rants here.
Now, I don't want to get off on a rant here, but
I remember going and seeing the Masters of the Universe movie with Dolph Lundgren and Frank Langella. Still an awesome movie. I don't care what anybody says. But I was so used to the more cartoony violence and more used to He-Man always winning, and again, things are much brighter, and they have this scene where He-Man's being whipped, and it was like I cried. I was a kid seeing this. That was the guy you watched on TV, the embodiment of strength and power and the right thing being whipped. And I remember being, everybody talks about Transformers the movie and the trauma there. No one really talks about this one. So yeah, I wonder if younger audience members had a problem with that. But yeah, I think on the whole, this was a pretty enjoyable film. I do wish, this is something, I think this has to do with the animation, the CG of the dragons and everything. I do wish that some of these live action films had a little bit more vibrant color palette. It always feels to me like the color palette is so muted that a lot of the brightness and the, I don't know, the adventure of it feels like it's always kind of flattened out. It makes everything a little less alive, at least to my eye. This is one of the least of those. I think that, again, the cinematography and everything is beautiful. The flying sequences are amazing. The action scenes are really well done. The end battle is pretty epic. I kind of wish I'd seen that one on the big screen. I bet it looked phenomenal. But I did feel like a lot of the colors felt, I don't know, it felt flat. And I feel like some of the costumes, while accurate to the film, the original, I guess we've gotten spoiled with really rich historical details in costumes like you see on Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings. This felt a little bit more like people just kind of playing dress up. It took a little bit of time to get into the world. Everything felt a little, I don't know. And again, I understand they're trying to keep the aesthetic of the original. But especially someone like Hiccup, who again had a modern haircut, had a modern accent, and his costume looks very, very modern. I kind of wish they maybe livened up the costume design a little bit. These are all quibbles, little things that in the long run don't detract from the fact that A, it's a good movie, B, the central core of it, the core relationship, Hiccup and Toothless, is really well done. Once again, I give huge marks to Tom, I keep saying his name wrong, Mason Thomas, for doing all that with a, I'm assuming a tennis ball on a stick. I give him a lot of credit for forming a very tangible relationship, and that bond between Hiccup and Toothless, we can all feel it. Everybody, I think, has had a pet that they've really loved, and I think one of the great themes this gets across is, one of the reasons we love pets is pets love us no matter what. Your dog or my cat or something like that, they don't care what anybody says about me. They don't care who puts a mean comment on one of my videos or something like that. They still love me. And I think in this you can really see that bond of someone who needs someone to love him for who he is and give him the encouragement to kind of find his own path and use what he has and to stand out. I thought that was all done really well. Good lessons for kids. I think this film kind of checks all the boxes. So on the whole, I enjoyed this. There is just one nagging thing in the back of my head, and I think sometimes this is just me being a killjoy.
Why can't I leave things nice?
But, so as I've mentioned, I had no prior connection to this franchise or this film. But I was curious about something. So I went online and I put it out there and I asked people, for those who are, were there any big changes made? How accurate is this to the original? And, is it more of a shot-for-shot remake, or are there big things? I know the only thing I'd heard, and this is very rare, this one did not seem to draw a lot of ire from fans. The only thing that they did that was sinful is Astrid had dark hair and she was supposed to be blonde. But other than that, I didn't hear anybody hacking into this one like they did for Snow White or anything like that. So I put it out there, and the general responses I got back was that this was very faithful to the original, that it, that some of the action scenes were expanded a bit and restaged, and any other changes in dialogue or scene construction or theme were minor tweaks. And the fan base seems very happy. So I understand that. Again, I'm just being an old man yelling at a cloud here. But it does beg the question in me. If this is just a shot-for-shot remake, then why did we make it? Like, couldn't you just go watch the original? I don't know. I'm being such a stickler here. It's show business. You do it to make money. I mean, duh. But there is always that voice in me of like, if you're not trying to add anything new, if you're not trying to do something interesting with the narrative or whatever, then why are you making it? And say what you will about the Disney live-action remakes, and I have. At least when you watch those, you can see that they were trying to do something different with each of them, whether that was advisable or not. A lot of times what they tried to do was just apologize and plug perceived plot holes because they took the CinemaSins videos too seriously. It's what they did with the Beauty and the Beast. That was just so many goddamn attempts to go, oh, here's every plot hole you've ever pointed out and the answer to it, and you didn't make a movie, you just made a 2-hour response to CinemaSins. Like I say, the Snow White one, which I thought was a decent film, actually tried to update the story and, answer all these complaints that people have been making about the Snow White movies for years, and all they got for it was, ripped apart. So, I don't know. I think sometimes I'm just a cranky old man, and you make a shot-for-shot remake, I'm not happy. You make a different movie out of it and try to do something new with it, and I'm not happy.
How miserable do I have to be before you're happy?
But I guess it is just a thing of... I'm trained to think of theater and performance and movies as art in one way or another. And yes, it is show business, and that's going to lead you down to a lot of potholes. But I don't know. I just kind of wish that maybe they had tried to do something a little different with it. I don't know. But then again, the fans are happy. The people that you made the movie for enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it. A new fan enjoyed it. So I don't know what I'm complaining about other than to hear myself complain. In the end, this was a fun movie. It was enjoyable. It was colorful. It had imagination. It had heart. So this is when we have to say, shut up, Brandon, and just enjoy the damn movie. Sometimes I just need to be told that. So anyway, let's get to it. Excuse me. So let's wrap this up. So final grade for How to Train Your Dragon. I'm going a solid A- on this one. Solid A-. It was a good time at the theater, and no major issues to complain about. And again, the fans for whom it was made enjoyed it. So what else could you possibly want? So yeah, it's a fine one. It was a fun movie. So there you have it. All right. So I'm rambling. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for coming along, and we'll see you next time. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.